You lay down to sleep, and your mind refused to go quiet with you. In the dark, the harder you press a thought down, the louder it seems to echo back. The way a name you are trying to remember only hides further when you reach for it. And psychology has a gentler name for that than weakness. The part almost no one says out loud, the effort to control a thought, is often the very thing that keeps it alive. Welcome to Psychology for Sleep. Tonight moves toward the opposite of force, toward understanding the mind so well that the grip begins to open on its own, the way a fist relaxes in sleep without being told. You're lying in the quiet where every thought you pushed away has come to find you. Let them be here. We begin by understanding them. Underneath everything we follow tonight sits one quiet question: why does controlling the mind feel almost impossible? And what does the mind actually need from you instead? You have probably noticed that you cannot simply decide to stop thinking. You can decide to move your hand, to close a door, to look away from a screen. But when you tell your own mind to be still, something in it keeps going anyway. This is one of the oldest frustrations of being human, and it is not a sign that something is wrong with you. Thought does not work like muscle. The parts of the brain that generate ideas, memories, and worries run largely on their own, the way your heartbeat does. What you experience as your thoughts is mostly a stream you are watching, not a machine you are driving. Tonight, that distinction is where everything begins. Notice how a thought arrives. You rarely sit down and construct one deliberately. It appears, already formed, as if handed to you. Researchers who study spontaneous cognition describe most of mental life this way: ideas surfacing without invitation, one pulling the next along. Your thinking is less like a writer composing sentences and more like a radio you did not tune, picking up whatever is in the air. When you lie awake feeling besieged by your own thinking, you are not failing to control a process you were ever truly in charge of. You are awake enough to notice the traffic that runs through every mind, all the time, usually beneath your attention. There is a small experiment that tends to prove its own point. Spend the next moment trying not to picture a white bear. Most people find the bear appears almost instantly and returns each time they push it away. The psychologist Daniel Wegner built a body of research around exactly this, and it became one of the most reliable findings in the study of thought. The instruction not to think of something seems to summon it. If you have ever told yourself, "Do not think about tomorrow," and then thought of little else, you have already met the mechanism we follow tonight. It is not personal. It is structural. Wegner's explanation is gentle once you see it. When you try to suppress a thought, your mind quietly splits the job in two. One part goes looking for something else to focus on, anything to fill the space. A second part runs underneath, scanning to check whether the unwanted thought has come back. That second part is the problem. To make sure you are not thinking of the white bear, some corner of your mind has to keep the white bear close. The watchman holds a picture of the intruder in order to watch for him. That is why control so often produces the opposite of what you wanted. Consider what that means for the thoughts you most want to escape at night. The more you try to push away the conversation you keep replaying, or the worry about the morning, the more a part of you is obligated to keep checking that it is gone. And checking means touching it again. Each push is also a pull. The thought you are trying to lose becomes the one thing your thinking is quietly organized around. You were set up to lose this particular fight by a system that was only ever trying to help you stay alert to what matters. Seeing that clearly is the first loosening. The monitoring process grows stronger when you are tired. When your mind has plenty of energy, the first part, the one finding distractions, can mostly keep up. But when you are depleted, stressed, or short on sleep, the effortful part falters first. While the automatic watchman keeps running, research on what scientists call cognitive load shows that suppression fails hardest exactly when your reserves are lowest. And when are your reserves lowest? Late at night, in the dark, after a long day. The hour you most want quiet is the hour your tools for forcing it are least available. The cruelty in the timing is real, but the reason is not mysterious. There is one more thing the night does. During the day, your attention is occupied. Tasks, people, screens, the steady demand of doing. All of that gives the mind somewhere to put itself. When you lie down and the lights go out, the distractions fall away, and the part of you that was busy finding something else to think about runs out of material. What remains is the watchman, still scanning, now with nothing to compete for your attention. A worry that stayed manageable all day can flood in the moment your head touches the pillow. Nothing has gotten worse. The room has simply grown quiet enough for you to hear what was always there. You know the particular loop, replaying a moment from the day, a thing you said, a thing left undone, turning it over as if this time the turning might resolve it. Or maybe yours runs the other direction, not backward but forward, rehearsing tomorrow until every possible outcome has been accounted for. Either way, the loop almost never solves anything. It mostly deepens the groove. Each replay feels like problem solving, but it is closer to a needle caught in a record. Your thinking returns because returning feels like control, like vigilance, like doing something about the discomfort. Yet the act of revisiting is what keeps the discomfort lit. So the question we started with begins, quietly, to turn. We assumed the trouble was that we were not controlling our thoughts well enough, that with more discipline, more willpower, we could finally master them. But everything so far points the other way. The harder the grip, the more the mind slips. If effort is the thing making it worse, then the answer was never going to be found in more effort. Many people have felt this without being able to name it. The sense that trying harder is digging the hole deeper. You are not wrong to feel that. You are noticing something true. Part of why this happens lives in how attention works. When you label a thought as unwanted, bad, intrusive, the one you should not be having, you hand it a kind of importance. Attention is drawn to what the mind has flagged as significant. And do not think this is itself a flag. Being told there is one door in the house you are not allowed to open makes the door the only thing you can think about. The thoughts that haunt you at night are often not the most meaningful ones. They are the ones you have been fighting hardest, and the fight is what made them loud. When your mind is not occupied by a task, it does not switch off. It switches inward. Neuroscientists have mapped a network of brain regions that become active precisely when you stop focusing outward, often called the default mode network. Behind mind-wandering, self-reflection, replaying the past and rehearsing the future. This network runs it all. It is also the source of the chatter that rises when you finally lie still. The mind talking to itself in the dark is not malfunctioning. It is doing exactly what this network evolved to do whenever the outside world stops asking for your attention. Knowing the voice has a home can make it feel a little less like an enemy and a little more like weather. Here is where many people get caught. They try to relax. They tell themselves to calm down, to clear the mind, to make it blank. And the instruction itself creates tension. Relaxation cannot be ordered into existence, because ordering is effort, and effort is the opposite of release. Gripping harder to fall asleep keeps a thin current of arousal running through the body, just enough to hold the door to sleep closed. The gentlest thing you will learn tonight is that letting go is not another task to perform well. It is the absence of the performing, and that is all it ever needed to be. Some thoughts are stickier than others, and there is a reason. When a thought carries emotion, fear, embarrassment, longing, a region deep in the brain involved in feeling, the amygdala, tags it as worth keeping close. Emotionally charged memories get encoded more strongly and retrieved more easily. Useful when the stakes are real. Exhausting when the stakes are only a replayed conversation. The thoughts that visit you at night are so often the tender ones, the ones with feeling attached. Because your mind is doing its oldest job, holding tight to what matters emotionally. It just cannot tell what time it is. The body is listening to all of this. Every time a worried thought arrives, there is a faint physical answer. The breath shortens. The shoulders gather. The heart lifts its pace by a beat or two. These small changes feed back into the mind as a signal that something is wrong, which generates more thought, which tightens the body further. A loop with no natural flaw, thought and tension trading the lead. You may have felt it as a low hum that will not settle. The loop is not confirmation that your worries are accurate. It is a feedback system confirming itself, around and around. There is a particular difficulty reserved for sleep itself. The more you try to fall asleep, the more awake you tend to become. Sleep researchers have a name for it. Sleep effort, and it works exactly like the white bear. Sleep is one of the few states that cannot be willed. It arrives only when you stop reaching for it, lying there calculating how many hours remain, urging yourself to drop off. You are applying force to the one thing that force repels. People who have struggled with sleep often describe the bed as a place of pressure. The pressure is real, and it is, quietly, the obstacle itself. Here is a small but freeing idea. A thought is not a command, and it is not a fact. When the mind says you handled that badly or tomorrow will go wrong, it feels like a verdict delivered by an authority. But thoughts are events, not truths. Mental weather passing through, generated by the same restless system we have been tracing. Cognitive psychologists describe learning to see a thought as just a thought, rather than as reality itself. The worry that wakes you at 3 a.m. is a sentence the mind produced. You are allowed to hear it without believing it, and without arguing back. What happens to a feeling you refuse to feel? Research is fairly consistent. It does not disappear. Suppressed emotion tends to resurface, often later and often stronger, and holding it down carries its own physical cost. An unfelt feeling keeps resending its signal. The way a message marked unread keeps returning to the top of the inbox. The sadness or anxiety you packed away during a busy day can return so insistently at night because it was never gone. It was waiting for the room to go quiet. The unexpected mercy in this, the thing you have been bracing against, may settle faster when you stop bracing, because the bracing is part of what keeps it knocking. Now a quiet doorway opens. There is a part of you doing the noticing, standing slightly apart from the stream of thoughts, watching them pass. The ability to observe your own thinking without being swept into it is something every person already possesses. It does not have to be built or earned. You are not only the thoughts, you are also the one aware of them. The simple act of watching a thought arrive, without climbing inside it, changes your relationship to it. The thought keeps moving, but you are no longer carried off by every current. From this small distance, the loud mind starts to look less like a flood you are drowning in, and more like a river you are sitting beside. When you stop fighting a thought and let it be present, something counterintuitive happens. It tends to fade faster. Research comparing suppression with acceptance finds that people who allow an unwanted thought to come and go without struggle experience less of it over time than those who try to force it out. The white bear, unguarded, eventually wanders off. It is the guarding that keeps it pacing the room. Allowing is not approval, and it is not giving up. It is removing the resistance the thought was feeding on. The thoughts you stop wrestling are often the first ones to grow quiet, as if they only stayed for the fight. There is a tool so simple it sounds like it could not work, and yet the brain imaging is fairly clear. When you put a feeling into words, naming it plainly. This is worry. This is sadness. Activity in the emotional centers of the brain tends to settle, while the more reflective, regulating regions come online. Naming a feeling. Research by Matthew Lieberman at UCLA found turns down the volume on it simply by acknowledging it. You are not analyzing or solving or storytelling. You are giving the feeling a name and letting that be enough. The mind calms a little the moment it feels accurately heard, even when the one hearing it is you. Most of what your mind does, you never see. The deliberate, worrying part of you that feels like the center of yourself is only a thin layer. Beneath it runs a vast amount of automatic processing, pattern recognition, memory, prediction, emotion, constantly active beneath awareness. That deeper system shapes the thoughts that float up far more than conscious thinking shapes it. When a thought you did not choose rises at night, it is often a message from that layer, surfacing a pattern, a fear, an old association. The point of tonight is not to fight that layer. It is to learn its language. As you drift towards sleep, your mind passes through a soft in-between state, not fully awake, not yet asleep. In these minutes, the usual guardrails loosen. Images and half-thoughts drift more freely, and the deeper layer comes closer to the surface. Researchers find this state more open, more receptive, less defended than ordinary waking. The moments before sleep can feel strangely vivid. The mind you are lying beside right now is not one you have to subdue. It is one that is gently opening. What you bring to these minutes, gentleness rather than force, understanding rather than argument, tends to be received. So the question has changed shape. We began asking how to control the mind, as though control were the goal, and we had only failed to achieve it. But everything tonight points the other way. The mind was never an enemy to be subdued, and control was never the tool that would work. What it has been asking for, all along, is to be understood. Its loops seen for what they are, its loud thoughts allowed to pass, its deeper patterns met with curiosity rather than war. The relief in this is real. What lies ahead is not harder than fighting. It is far, far easier. There is a second arrow people fire at themselves in the dark. Not the worry itself, but the harsh response to it. Why can't I just stop? What is wrong with me? Everyone else is asleep. This self-criticism is its own kind of arousal, a fresh layer of stress on top of the first. Research on self-compassion finds that meeting your own struggle with the tone you would use for a tired friend lowers that stress and lets the body soften. A person with a mind doing what minds do is not failing at sleep. Spoken to kindly, the mind tends to quiet sooner than it does under interrogation. The kindness is not indulgence. It is regulation. Something has shifted, not because the facts arrived in a particular order, but because the mind has been allowed to receive something it usually does not permission. Permission to be where it is. Permission to have the thoughts it is having. Permission to stop performing the project of control and sit. Instead, in the quiet fact of being present, the loud mind was never waiting to be defeated. It was waiting to be understood. And from here, something different becomes possible. Not harder than what came before, quieter. So a different way of being with your own mind comes into view. Not the grim project of controlling it, which only tightens the grip, but something closer to accompaniment. You notice a thought. You let it be a thought. You name what you feel. You meet it gently. You let the deeper layer surface without needing to win. None of this is effort in the old sense. It is the opposite of effort. The mind that would not switch off was never waiting to be defeated. It was waiting to be understood. And from here, the rest of tonight is about learning, slowly, what that understanding actually looks like in practice. Beneath the thought you can hear, something older is running. What surfaces as conscious thinking? The loop, the self-criticism at 2 a.m, is the top of a very long stack. Underneath it run patterns that formed before you had words for them, associations built in childhood, emotional templates assembled from what was available when you were first learning what the world was. These patterns are not secret or shameful. They are the mind's most efficient work. Learned shortcuts that once solved something. The loud thought at the surface almost always has a quieter source underneath. Seeing that is not frightening. For most people, it is the beginning of a gentler relationship with their own mind. Psychologists who study the deep organizing frameworks the mind uses, sometimes called schemas, describe how an early pattern can run invisibly for decades, filtering what you notice, shaping how situations feel, generating the same emotional weather again and again. You may carry a framework that says situations are inherently unsafe, or that you must perform in order to be acceptable, or that rest must be earned before it is allowed. You did not choose these frameworks deliberately. They were assembled from what was available when you were learning what the world was. The thought that visits you at night may be the surface expression of something assembled long ago, not a verdict about who you are now. Those patterns can change. The brain retains a degree of plasticity through life. The deep structures built by experience can also be revised by experience. What cannot update them is the same suppression and avoidance that keeps them from being touched at all. What can update them is contact, gentle, clear, non-defensive contact with what the pattern actually contains. This is not therapy in a clinical sense. It is the natural updating process of a mind that is finally willing to look. The fear behind the closed door is rarely as large as the one that lives in keeping it closed. Seeing it, naming it, is how it begins to shrink. Acceptance and commitment therapy. One of the most thoroughly researched approaches in contemporary psychology, makes a distinction that changes everything once you feel it. It separates the self that has thoughts from the thoughts themselves. You are not the angry thought, or the anxious one, or the memory that keeps returning. You are the awareness in which those thoughts appear, moving from being inside the snow globe to watching it from outside. The snow is still falling, but you are no longer being shaken. This shift does not require years of practice. It can happen in a single breath in which you catch yourself watching a thought rather than becoming it. The technique has a name: diffusion. To diffuse a thought is to unhook from it, to notice it without treating it as reality, without obeying it, without arguing with it. Whatever thought is present right now, take a small step back and observe it as a sentence your mind is producing. There is a thought that tomorrow will go wrong. Not tomorrow will go wrong. The thought has not changed, but you are no longer fused to it, carried by it, trapped inside it. The same words, held a breath apart from you, lose most of their power. The mind that invented the thought is also capable of this small, sufficient distance. The body, too, holds what the mind would rather not see. Every emotion has a physical signature: tightness in the chest, weight behind the eyes, a particular stillness in the stomach, and it tends to arrive before the thought that explains it. People with greater ability to read their own bodily signals tend to have easier access to the emotional information those sensations carry. If you can feel what is true before you have to think it, you can respond to what is actually happening rather than to the story you have built around it. The body is not the mind's adversary. Quite often, it is the more honest half. Breath is where this becomes practical. It is the only automatic process, the only thing the body runs without instruction, that you can also choose to change. A slow, extended exhale activates the parasympathetic branch of the nervous system, the branch the body uses for rest and settling. The vagus nerve, running from the brainstem through the lungs and heart, carries the signal directly. The heart rate slows. The body loosens its grip on alertness. You are not forcing relaxation. You are speaking to the body in the one language it always understands. And it answers, within seconds, on its own. The deeper layer of the mind communicates. Dreams are one channel, but there are others. The sudden clarity that arrives mid-shower. The feeling that something is wrong before you can name it. The answer that surfaces fully formed upon waking. These are moments when the quieter layer rises. When the mind speaks across the boundary between what you know consciously and what you know some other way. The reason they happen near sleep is partly that the noise of the day has lowered. Making enough stillness for that signal to come through is its own skill. Tonight, that stillness is already here. When you are in the half-asleep state, the slow dissolve between waking and dreaming. The deeper layer becomes more accessible than at almost any other time. Psychologists call this the hypnagogic state. The mind loosens its editing function. Images arise without being summoned. Associations run freely. This is not only an interesting feature of sleep, it is useful information. The thoughts that drift unbidden as you begin to go are not intrusions to be chased away. They are communications from the part of you that rarely gets a quiet enough room to speak. Receiving them, even lightly, is a form of self-knowledge. Every thought you have had tonight about control shares a common assumption that the thinking self is the proper master of the mind. Cognitive science has been quietly revising this picture for decades. The intention to move your hand registers in the brain a fraction of a second before you are conscious of deciding. Preferences, impressions, and conclusions form below awareness before they are handed up as choices. The sense of being in charge is real. But it is real the way a translator is in charge of a conversation essential, but not the original speaker. That is not unsettling. It is one of the quietest invitations to ease the grip that science has ever offered. Research suggests that people who let their minds wander without judgment, what psychologists call high-trait mindfulness, tend to show less activity in the default mode network regions tied to self-referential worry. Compared with those who suppress or avoid, feel the weight of your arms for a moment, the warmth where the body meets the bed. When you stop fighting your own mental activity, the brain does not need to work as hard to manage it. The quieting is not a reward saved for long-term meditators. It is available in the simple act of no longer labeling what the mind does as something to be fixed. You are not trying to change anything. You are simply here. Worry has its own internal logic. It feels productive. If you think hard enough about a problem, something in you expects the thinking will eventually arrive at a solution. For some problems it does. For the ones that visit at 3 a.m, it almost never does. Because those problems are not solvable by more thinking. And the mind in the dark is tired, lacks information it will have tomorrow, and operates closer to emotion than reason. Clinical psychologists describe this as unproductive worry, the loop that generates the sensation of effort without any forward motion. Noticing this clearly, without judgment, is how the loop begins to feel less obligatory. The thoughts that keep you awake are rarely about this moment. Almost always they are about the past, replayed, regretted, or the future, anticipated, feared. The present moment, as you are lying in it, rarely contains an emergency. This surface is solid. This darkness is safe. This body, however tired, is breathing. The mind can visit the past and future, but it cannot stay there without your continued investment. What feels like uncontrollable thinking is partly a habit of returning. A practiced movement toward the same territory. Habits shift slowly. Noticing which territory you keep returning to is the beginning of choosing different ground. Contemplative traditions across cultures, and modern psychology in its own way, describe what is sometimes translated as the second arrow. The first arrow is the painful thought or feeling that arrives. The second is everything added to it, the judgment, the resistance, the story about what it means, the frustration at yourself for feeling it. The first arrow may have been unavoidable. The second one, always, is a choice. Much of the suffering in a sleepless night is not the original thought, but the relationship entered with it. The wrestling, the shame of still being awake. Withdrawing the second arrow does not make the first hurt less immediately. It stops making the wound larger. And here, somewhere in the middle of tonight, something may be loosening. Not because the understanding arrived in a particular order, But because the mind has been allowed to receive something it usually does not permission to be where it is, permission to have the thoughts it is having, permission to stop performing the project of control and sit instead in the quiet fact of being present. The mind that feels impossible to govern is not a broken mind. It is one that was never meant to be governed in the first place, only understood, and understanding, it turns out, does not require effort. It is already available, right now. The tension we have been circling has reached its fullest point. The paradox of a mind that cannot master itself, and the discovery that mastery was never the right word. Let the body register that. You do not need to resolve anything in this breath. What comes next follows the mind down past its loud surface, into the quieter patterns underneath, the ones that were running all along. Even knowing this, the grip can find its way back, not because you chose it, but because the signal that says hold on runs deeper than a single evening's understanding. Research on anxiety and cognitive performance finds that the experience of mental effort, the feeling of trying hard to think correctly, narrows the range of thought available. The mind under pressure loops more readily, sees fewer options, thinks less flexibly. The very state produced by trying to master your thoughts is the state that makes mastery least available. The way out is not a harder push. It is the slow discovery that the grip was always optional. The brain during sleep does something it cannot do. While awake, it processes emotional experience without the stress chemicals the body releases when worried. During certain sleep stages, emotional memories are re-encoded, and the charge attached to them tends to diminish. The memory remains, but some of its urgency fades. Researchers describe sleep as a kind of overnight emotional processing that runs without being asked. The thought you cannot resolve tonight may loosen on its own between now and morning, not because you solved it, but because you slept through it. The night is already working on your behalf. The more important you make it to fall asleep, the more critical, the more watched, the more measured against the clock, the more sleeping becomes a performance. And performances require an audience. A region of the brain involved in watching the self stays active during self-monitoring, and its activity is tied to exactly the kind of arousal that keeps sleep from arriving. Watching yourself try to sleep is a form of being awake. The attention directed at whether you are falling asleep is the attention sleep needs borrowed back for itself. The gentlest thing available to you right now is to stop checking and let the body do what it already knows how to do. Researchers who study intrusive thoughts, the unwanted images, impulses, or memories that enter without invitation, find something consistent. They occur in virtually everyone. The content varies. The mechanism is universal. The group most distressed by intrusive thoughts is not the one with the most unusual content. It is the one that treats those thoughts as meaningful, as signs of character, as threats, as things that must be neutralized. The thought itself, in almost every documented case, is not the problem. The relationship formed with the thought is where the suffering lives, released without ceremony. An intrusive thought leaves almost no trace. Examined, feared, and fought, it grows in exact proportion to the fight. Language shapes how the mind organizes experience, and you can use this. A practice from acceptance and commitment therapy is as simple as adding a short phrase before whatever thought is present. I notice I'm having the thought that, followed by whatever is there. I notice I'm having the thought that I said the wrong thing today. The sentence makes explicit what is easy to forget: this is a thought, not a fact. The cognitive distance this creates is enough, for many people, to interrupt the loop. The thought does not vanish. It just becomes a thought again. Instead of the walls of the room you are trapped in, what you attend to is, in a real sense, what you experience. The rest of reality, however rich, recedes to background. When attention is caught in an unwanted loop, the experience of lying in a warm, dark room, breath moving slowly, body held and still, becomes invisible, even though it is the larger reality. No technique is required to access it. There is only the small reorientation of noticing what else is present: the feeling of the sheets, the weight of your arms, the particular quiet that exists right now, underneath the louder noise of what the mind has been saying. All of this has been here the whole time. The deeper layer of the mind operates on a different logic than conscious reasoning. It thinks in patterns and associations, in images and feelings more than words. And it is not particularly interested in the linear arguments your waking mind finds compelling. Reasoning with yourself rarely works at night, partly because you are applying the tools of one system to a problem owned by another. What the deeper system responds to is not argument, but atmosphere, physical calm, non-resistance. A sense of safety that arrives not through logic, but through the body's signals. The breath's pace, the muscular release of a face that has stopped trying to solve something. Psychology draws a useful distinction between actual control over a situation and the sense that one has control. The sense of control, even when inaccurate, is tied to lower stress, better sleep, and steadier coping. What matters tonight is not control over your thoughts. It is control over your relationship to them. Whether to engage with a thought, argue with it, flee from it, or allow it to pass, the choice is genuinely available. It does not require the thoughts to change or stop. It only requires the quiet decision to stop treating each one as a directive. That decision can be made right now, in the dark, without effort. When people are asked what they fear would happen if they stopped fighting their thoughts, the answer is almost always the same: the thoughts would take over. Spiral, never stop. But that fear is itself a thought, a prediction generated by the same system it is trying to describe. Research finds the opposite thoughts that are no longer resisted tend to move. They arrive. They are present. And they pass. The way clouds drift when you stop trying to hold them in place. The mind that frightens you by running is the mind under pressure, allowed to run without consequence. It finds its own pace. And that pace, in the dark and the quiet, tends to slow. The question we opened with has changed form more than once. It began as, why is controlling the mind so difficult? Then it became, what is the monitoring system actually doing? Then what does the deeper layer actually need? And now it has become something closer to what does it mean to be present with a, mind you, do not control. And find that presence enough. The answer is still forming. What the science has shown so far is that the mind quiets not through force, but through understanding. What has not yet been fully reached is where that understanding settles. The place in the mind that was never turbulent to begin with. The tension we have been tracing has arrived at its natural resting point. Not resolved, but held differently. The body knows the difference between a fist and an open hand. Let this be the breath where one begins to become the other. The second half of tonight follows what has been building here, all the way down to where it finally opens. Right now, behind the words, behind the thoughts, something has been listening without effort. The quiet awareness in which all of tonight is happening. It does not need to be found or cultivated or created. It is already present, the way space is present before anything fills it. That observing quality does not get damaged by difficult thoughts. It does not tire from the looping. It simply watches. You have access to it right now, not as a technique, but as a fact. You are aware of being here. And that awareness has not been disturbed by anything the thinking mind has done tonight. Research suggests that attending to present moment experience without judgment produces reliable effects on the body under stress. Cortisol, the primary stress hormone, tends to be lower in people who practice this regularly. The amygdala shows reduced reactivity. The prefrontal cortex, involved in regulation and perspective, shows increased connectivity with emotional centers. What matters for tonight is that these effects are not reserved for long-term practitioners. The underlying mechanism, simply noticing experience without immediately evaluating it, can begin shifting something in a single session, even in the dark. Even without having practiced before, the body responds to the absence of alarm, however briefly achieved. The thoughts that trouble you most at night tend to be about identity. Who you are, how you appeared, whether you handled something correctly, whether you are fundamentally adequate. These are not random topics. The mind returns to them because identity genuinely matters. What research on self-concept adds is this: identity is not a fixed object to be protected. It is a running story, revised constantly, assembled from many more moments than the one you are currently replaying. The version of you that said the wrong thing today is one sentence in a very long, much more varied account, replaying events as they might have gone differently. The if-only loop, peaks at night and peaks after difficult experiences. It feels purposeful, like working toward a better version of what happened. But revisiting past events over which you have no further influence mostly increases distress without altering anything. What the mind is reaching for through this loop is not actually a better past. It is a sense of agency. The feeling that you could have done differently means the next time might be within your influence. Recognizing this need for agency, for not being helpless, is gentler than fighting the loop itself. During the sleep stages where memory consolidation is most active, the brain does not simply file the day's events in order. It cross-references them, connects the new with the old, looks for patterns, sometimes resolves problems that resisted waking logic. Certain things feel clearer in the morning. Questions you carry into sleep sometimes wake with you partially answered. The night is not a gap between days. It is where the mind does its deepest integration work. The thoughts moving through you right now, however uncomfortable, are part of what the night will turn over and return to you differently. When people shift attention deliberately to the physical experience of an emotion rather than its content, noticing where the feeling lives in the body, the chest pressure, the jaw, the hands, and rest attention there without trying to interpret or change it. The intensity and duration of the feeling tends to reduce more reliably than analysis does. The body can process what the mind cannot easily think through. If a feeling is present right now, You do not need to understand it completely. You only need to notice where it lives, and let your attention rest there without demanding anything of it. When the mind cannot stop talking, it is often because it does not feel heard. Clinical psychologists who work with persistent worry have found that deliberately setting aside bounded time to think about what worries you, and then stopping, reduces the overall volume of intrusive worrying more effectively than trying to suppress it. The worry is looking for acknowledgement, receiving it, briefly, on your own terms, seems to satisfy something the loop cannot. What worries you is asking, in its own clumsy way, to be seen and brief. Clear acknowledgement is often enough for it to settle. The language you use about your own mind shapes the experience of having it. Research on emotional granularity, how precisely people identify and name their emotional states, finds that those who distinguish between specific feelings rather than describing everything as simply stressed or bad regulate those feelings more effectively. Precision is not intellectualizing. It is a kind of accuracy the nervous system responds to. I feel embarrassed about what I said calls on slightly different resources than I feel terrible. And those resources are more targeted and more quickly resolved. Words are not just descriptions. Inside the mind, they are actions. Emotions are not purely passive events, things that happen to you. They are partly constructed by expectation and context. The brain is constantly generating predictions about what is happening and what to feel about it, adjusting experience to match those predictions. The emotional tone of a sleepless night is not entirely fixed by its content. The fear that this will never end, the certainty that tomorrow will be ruined, these are forecasts. And forecasts can be held a little more lightly once you know that is what they are. Not dismissed, not forced into optimism, just held as predictions, not facts. The night has not finished happening yet. There is a kind of intelligence that belongs to the body and runs independently of thought. The accumulated pattern recognition of a life lived, encoded in posture, muscle memory, breath, and reflex. Athletes draw on it when they stop thinking and let the body perform. Artists describe the moment the hand knows what to do before the mind can say why. In the context of sleep, this intelligence is available too. The body has slept thousands of times. It knows how. What stands in the way is not the body. It is the thinking that decided to supervise a process that has never needed supervising. Psychological flexibility, the capacity to be present with what is happening, to hold your own thoughts and feelings without being ruled by them, and to act in line with what genuinely matters to you, has been linked in research to reduced anxiety, better sleep, lower rates of depression, and higher life satisfaction. Stephen Hayes and colleagues at the University of Nevada, who developed acceptance and commitment therapy, have traced this across hundreds of studies. Flexibility is not a trait you either have or do not. It is a skill that begins on the first attempt. Tonight, in the dark, you are already practicing it. Neural circuits involved in threat detection carry what researchers call a negativity bias, tuned to catch danger faster than safety, to weight bad news more heavily than good, to treat ambiguity as confirmed threat. This is not a flaw. For most of evolutionary history, the cost of missing a predator was higher than the cost of a false alarm. But it means the mind left to its own defaults generates more threat-related thought than the situation requires. the late-night review of everything that went wrong, everything that might go wrong, is partly this ancient calibration running without its original context. You are not pessimistic. You are mammalian. When you observe your own mind with genuine curiosity, watching it as an interesting phenomenon rather than managing it as a problem, the quality of the observation tends to shift what is observed. Curiosity and anxiety cannot fully occupy the same space at the same time. Curiosity leans toward. Anxiety braces against. When you bring curiosity to the thoughts that trouble you, wondering where they came from, what pattern they belong to, what they are trying to protect, you have already changed your position in relation to them, and the thoughts, from that changed position, begin to lose some of their urgency. Evidence suggests the quality of attention you bring to falling asleep shapes not only how quickly sleep arrives, but the quality of what follows. Research on pre-sleep cognitive activity finds that neutral or gentle mental imagery, compared with verbal worry, is tied to shorter sleep onset and better sleep architecture. The brain entering sleep is still, to some extent, following the channel you last left it on. Not pressure to think correctly, permission to notice, without effort. What is simply present, the weight of the body, the softness of the dark, the fact that you are here, safe, breathing. These are not techniques, they are true. The capacity to override impulse and sustain effort draws on resources that deplete with use across a day. Some research suggests willpower may diminish as demands accumulate, though how this works is still being studied. What the evidence does show clearly is that by nightfall, anyone who has spent the day making decisions, managing emotions, and maintaining composure arrives with less regulatory capacity than they started with. Suppression, grip tighter, try harder, requires exactly the resource most spent by nightfall. The mind struggling at midnight is not a weak mind. It is an accurately tired one, trying to use a tool that has already been spent. People who try hardest to control how they feel tend, over time, to feel worse than those who allow their emotional experience without the added layer of judgment about having it. How you feel about feeling what you feel adds its own weight. Anxiety about anxiety is more disabling than anxiety alone. Shame about sadness deepens sadness. Frustration about sleeplessness is its own arousal. Removing that meta layer does not require advanced practice. It only requires noticing when you are in it and choosing once not to add more. That choice, even made imperfectly, begins to change the shape of the night. Certain kinds of worry recruit the mind's simulation systems, the same machinery used in planning and imagination, to run repeated versions of past or future events. These simulations feel as present as the events they replay. A replayed conversation arrives with the weight of when it happened. But the simulation is not the event. It is a model, and models can be stepped outside of by returning attention to the present, to sensation, to breath, in a way that the original event could not be escaped. You carry more agency in relation to the memory than you carry in relation to what the memory is of. According to one influential framework in neuroscience, proposed by Stephen Porges, the nervous system sends a recognizable signal when a situation is safe enough that it does not need to scan for threat. A lowering of vigilance, a release of the readiness to respond. Within this framework, the tone of a voice, the rhythm of speech, a face that is calm, can each carry that safety signal to the body. This is one reason soft speech, a voice that is not alarmed, not urgent, not demanding anything, can quiet the body in a way that self-instruction cannot. You are already inside that voice. Let it be enough. Letting go is not an absence of care. It is a recognition that certain things cannot be resolved through continued engagement, and that releasing them is not the same as losing them. The thought you let pass tonight will still be available tomorrow. In the light, when you are rested and the options are clearer, nothing of consequence is resolved at midnight through exhausted repetition. The brain in a sleep-deprived state has measurably narrower access to memory, creativity, and perspective. The most productive thing a struggling mind can do with an unsolved problem tonight is to leave it for morning. Not abandonment. Timing. People who sleep well are not people without difficult thoughts. They are people whose relationship to those thoughts allows sleep to happen anyway. In studies comparing good and poor sleepers on pre-sleep cognitive activity, the difference is not primarily in what the mind produces, but in whether the person can let a thought pass without engaging further. This is a skill. It was not always present in the good sleepers either. It developed through small, repeated choices not to follow every thought to its conclusion. Tonight is part of that development. Every time you notice a thought without climbing inside it, you are practicing the only thing that reliably works. In the weeks and months that follow, sustained effort to change a pattern, the mind does something quiet. It automates the new response. What began as a deliberate choice, to notice rather than suppress, to allow rather than fight, gradually becomes the default. Repetition lays down a new groove, and what the groove carries changes. The nights that feel effortful now will not always feel effortful. You are not fighting your way to a permanent destination. You are walking a new path, often enough that the path begins to exist on its own. And one day you arrive there before you decided to go. Something in the texture of a sleepless night has been part of human experience for as long as there have been humans lying awake in the dark. You are lying in very old company right now. Not because nothing has changed, but because the mind working through the night is not a modern invention, not a private failure. Across cultures, across centuries, people have described this same particular restlessness. The sense that difficulty gathers in the quiet hours is not evidence of something wrong with you. It is evidence of something deeply human in you, shared across more lives than you can count. Every thread we have followed tonight has been circling a single place. The thought that would not stop, the monitoring that kept it alive, the deeper layer surfacing in the dark, the body helping in the only language it has, and underneath all of it, the steady quiet that was never turbulent, the awareness in which everything happened, undamaged throughout. From here, the big idea lands fully. Your mind does not need to be controlled. It never did. What it has always been asking for. From the very first night you lay awake and wondered what was wrong, is simply to be understood. What has been circling tonight has gathered into one place. The recognition that the mind quiets not from force but from understanding. Not from control but from a clear and gentle seeing. The understanding you have been moving toward is already present. What follows now is simply letting it settle. Less argument, more arrival. There is a gentleness available to you right now that asks nothing of you. not focus, not effort, not the performance of being calm, just the quiet fact of lying here while the night does what nights do. The understanding arrived at tonight is not a technique to apply. It is a change in the ground you are standing on. From here, the thoughts that visit are not enemies. They are the mind doing what minds do. And you are the awareness in which that happens. Undamaged. Already whole. Your mind does not need to be controlled. It needs to be understood. This is not a consolation, not a reframe to try later. It is what the science actually shows. The effort to suppress a thought strengthens it. The monitoring system meant to help keeps the loop alive. The depletion that leaves you without resources for fighting is also the depletion that makes sleep most available. If the fighting stops, the deeper layer surfacing at night is not an intruder but a communicator. You were never the problem. The model was wrong. And seeing that clearly is the only thing that changes anything. Rest is not the reward for finishing the day correctly. It is what the body does when it is allowed to. All night, beneath the thinking, the body has been ready. Breath slowing, muscles softening, the heart taking its longest pauses between beats. It has been waiting for the mind to step aside. The way a room waits for the last voice to stop, the mind has been talking. That is all that happened here. And now the talking is beginning to find its own end. A thought is not more true because it is persistent. Persistence belongs to the monitoring process, not to importance. The thought that visits 40 times in a night has not been confirmed 40 times. It has been checked 40 times, which is different. What is confirmed tonight is only this: you are here. You are breathing. And something is quieter than it was when we began. There is nothing left to resolve tonight. Not a decision, simply what is true. The problems of tomorrow have more information than the problems of midnight, and a mind that has slept will carry them more easily than one that has worn itself down, turning them over in the dark. Tonight's only remaining work is to stop working. The body already knows how. It has known since before you had words for knowing anything. If you notice where the body is holding on, a shoulder, a jaw, the small muscles around the eyes that have been slightly active, slightly ready, those are not signs of failure. They are the last evidence of a system that has been protecting you all day, doing exactly its job. They do not need to be forced open. They only need to be noticed, and noticing, without demanding they change, is often enough for them to slowly give way on their own. In the dark, the mind becomes more permeable than it is during the day, more open to what has been circling beneath the surface, more receptive to quieter signals. This is not a vulnerability. It is the mind's way of integrating what the day could not hold. What surfaces now is not random noise. It is the completion of something the waking hours left unfinished. You do not need to understand it fully. You only need to let it move through. Somewhere between this moment and the morning, a threshold will be crossed. The way a wave arrives not because you called it, but because conditions were met. You are meeting conditions now. The breath is slower than it was. The thinking has loosened its hold. The grip on the day has found less and less to hold on to. And less. And less. The mind you have spent tonight with is not one that failed. It worked very hard at a task that was never going to yield to that kind of work. And it has spent these hours gently learning something different. A tired student who finally understands. Not weak. Not broken. Just new to this particular lesson. That learning does not disappear in the morning. It will be there the next night, slightly more worn into the path. The dark removes what dilutes difficult feelings during the day: busyness, other people, the forward motion of tasks. What the dark reveals was present all along. This is not the dark making things worse. It is the dark making things visible, and what is visible can, in time, be known. What is known tends to be less frightening than what remains in the shadows. The night, for all its difficulty, has been an honest companion. Every breath happening right now is the body continuing without instruction, continuing without effort, continuing because continuation is what it knows. The breath is not waiting for you to manage it. It is already managing. This is true of more than the breath. The heart, the warming blood, the slow tide of sleep chemistry building quietly in the cells. You are being carried. The carrying does not require your help. Near sleep, the edges of thoughts begin to soften. The boundary between one idea and the next becomes less distinct. Not confusion, the first loosening. It happens before you know it is happening. The way dawn happens before you see the light. If something like that is present now, even slightly, then something has already begun, quietly, without needing your permission. The self that lies here tonight, a little worn, having tried hard at things that did not always go the way they were meant to, is not one that needs defending. It is one that needs, more than anything, to be set down for a few hours, the way you set down something heavy at the end of a long carry, not abandoning it, not losing it, just letting it rest beside you for the night, while the body that has been carrying it finally rests too. What you needed to understand, you have understood. Not perfectly, not completely. Understanding never arrives all at once, and it was not meant to. But something has changed in the quality of the night since we began. The thoughts, where they come, are a little less loud. The space around them is a little more present. This is not a technique working. It is the mind finding its own way back to what it already was, underneath everything it was doing. Sleep is not a foreign state you have to travel to. It is the ground the mind rests on when it stops lifting itself away. You have been lifting yourself away. The way a hand stays tense above a surface it has not yet trusted enough to touch. The surface is here. It has been here the whole time. It will hold you. The thoughts arriving now are lighter. You may notice this, or noticing itself may be fading, which is its own kind of arrival, quiet and unhurried. Either way, what is happening does not require your attention to keep happening. The mind settling is not a performance. It has no need of a witness. Not the clock. Not the effort. Not even you. Researchers who have spent years studying the last minutes before sleep find, consistently, that the content of pre-sleep thought matters far less than the quality of engagement with it. Whether the mind is gripping or floating minds reach sleep faster. Regardless of what they are floating through, you are allowed to float. Nothing will be lost. Everything will be here when you wake. The quiet of the body is not empty. It is full of warmth, of the steady work of the heart, of the slow, unmeasured rhythm of breath, of the weight of limbs that have carried you through the whole of this day and are setting themselves down now, one by one. Rest is not the absence of the body. It is the body's own voice, finally audible, What you were looking for in the effort to control the mind was safety. The sense that if you could only manage the thoughts, the feelings, the loop, you would be safe from whatever the mind was circling. The safety was always here, not earned through management, not arrived at through effort, but present beneath the noise the whole time, waiting for the noise to ease. You do not have to reach it. You only have to stop blocking it. You are not your thoughts. The observing awareness is distinct from its content. You have never been the same thing as the sentences passing through you. Tonight you have felt this, even if only briefly. The thoughts came, the awareness remained. Nothing about the awareness was damaged or diminished by any of it. That unchanged, undamaged presence. That is who is here right now. In its natural state, the mind does not loop, it moves. Thought arrives, to pass, and is followed by the next, the way images drift across still water. The looping is what happens when a thought is caught and held, recycled, fed back through the system, released from the catching. The mind returns to its natural motion. It was always moving. The stillness that feels like silence is that movement slowing to the pace of sleep. Something is finishing, not in the sense of ending, but completing, the way a phrase of music resolves, the way a breath finds its natural end without being pushed. The night has moved from resistance to understanding, from effort to allowance, from the loud surface to the quiet underneath. What remains now is not a distance to travel. It is a threshold to cross. And thresholds are crossed not by trying, but by arriving. The last thing to release is the need to confirm that releasing is happening. The subtle watching of whether you are doing this correctly. The monitoring of your own letting go is the final form of the same pattern we began with tonight. The body is not waiting for your verification. It is already in motion. The last thing left is to stop checking and trust what was already underway. What is true right now? The room is dark. The body is still. The breath is moving on its own. Somewhere outside, the night is continuing. The ordinary, unremarkable, utterly reliable continuation of a world that does not need your supervision to keep going. You were allowed to be here. You are allowed to remain. The permission you were waiting for was never going to come from anywhere but here. Right now, in many places, others are lying in the same dark with the same kind of mind, the same loop, the same question about why it will not stop. The company is very large and very quiet, and everyone in it is moving toward the same place. You have never been alone in this. Some have already arrived. You are close. The mind that could not switch off was not broken. It was doing the only thing it knew to do with what it carried. Tonight it learned something different. Not a trick, not a technique, but a slightly truer understanding of its own nature. That understanding does not disappear in the morning. It will be there the next night. And the night after that, each time, a little more worn in. Each time, a little less effort to arrive at this same quiet place. You don't need to deserve this rest. You never did. The night was always going to hold you. Whether or not the thoughts were figured out. Whether or not you said the right thing. Whether or not tomorrow goes the way you want it to. The mind that spent the evening trying to earn its own quiet was already quiet underneath. Waiting, not hiding. It was here when you arrived. It will be here when you wake. It is what you are made of. beneath everything else. Something has finished and does not need to be named. Let it be here the way darkness is here, not as absence, but as the thing itself. The mind has understood what it needed to understand. The understanding has moved from the thinking into the body now. Softer than thought, quieter than effort. Whatever was circling has found its level. You are already somewhere the forcing cannot follow. Tonight began with a question. Why does the mind that wants rest refuse to give it? And the answer came not by silencing the loop, but by tracing what the loop was made of, effort feeding on itself. Monitoring what it was trying to release. Keeping alive exactly what it was trying to quiet. The understanding that changed everything was not a technique. It was a recognition the mind quiets not through force but through understanding. And that understanding was available the whole time. Beneath everything the mind was doing. Keep this for the night you need it most. It will be waiting. The door has been quiet for a while now. Let the breath be the last thing you attend to. Not to manage it. Not to count it. Only to feel it moving through you without being asked. The body that has carried you through this entire day is setting down its last held thing. If sleep comes, let it come the way understanding came tonight. Not reached for. Not earned. Simply allowed. If it doesn't, this quiet is already its own rest, the body still, the breath moving, the awareness present and without demand. But if your eyes are still open, you, who spent tonight learning that the mind quiets when it is finally heard rather than fought, let that be the last thing that loosens. You are already held by something that was here before the thinking started and will be here long after it stops. In this playlist, every hour has been following the question of what the anxious mind actually needs, and what it needs, it turns out, is exactly what you gave it tonight, not force, but presence, one sleepy soul at a time. Good night.